Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing davalicc in the 15-minute pool on ICC. I'm going to play d4 in this one. This guy is from Mexico, it seems. Yeah, and he's playing potentially a Benko Gambit. Yep, could have been a Benoni too. I'm going to take, and after he goes a6, I have to decide if I want to play that e3 line again. I've been having a lot of success with it, so I'm very tempted to play it once again. Yeah, let's do it. I like to get variety on this channel, but when you feel like you found a line that works against a certain opening, it's just so tempting to keep going with it, basically, until someone proves otherwise. So e3, and black can take on b5, or they can play g6 here. He takes. Okay, so this is one of the most direct lines that black can play. I'm going to check this guy's stats just so I can learn a little bit more about him. Yeah, doesn't have a ton of games yet in the 15-minute pool. Only 6 games. He's played more time controls other than 15-minute. Like, he more often plays 5-minute and 3-minute games. Bishop a6. Okay, so that's a little bit unusual. I'll probably just take and play knight c3 against that. Yeah, there's no reason to do anything else. So I'm happy with this because a lot of times white has to pay a penalty in order to be able to castle in the Benko. And in the main line where white captures the second pawn on a6 and black takes back with the bishop, if white wants to play their e-pawn up to e4, they have to allow bishop takes f1, king takes f1, and white has trouble castling. So the fact that I've already got the light square bishops exchanged and I didn't have to disturb my potential for castling is already kind of nice. So he plays d6. I'm half tempted to play queen a4 check, but that doesn't do anything after knight d7, so I won't be doing that. Knight f3 or knight ge2, that's what I'm looking at. Let's just play knight f3. Don't see any good reason to go to e2. It's just I have that option. We'll just castle. I'll probably play bishop g7. And we have a pretty standard looking position for the Benko Gambit. Rook e1 seems fine. I think I'm going to play e4, actually. Maybe if he castles, it might be decent for me to play e5 right away. Is what I'm thinking. So just make him think about this move. So if castles e5, he takes, I take with the knight. I wonder if he could take on d5 then, however. Yeah, I don't think it's worth calculating that for me, so I'll just play rook e1. I'll play it quickly because I know this move is useful. So in the Benko, black hopes to get compensation down the A and the B files typically. So they'll be looking to get this rook that's currently on f8 over to the b8 square and use both of these rooks to bear down on white's pawns. White does have an extra pawn, but it can be difficult to utilize sometimes because black can throw up a lot of roadblocks and they have 2 nice half-open files to work with. Okay, so here again I'm looking at e5. This is a move that if white can achieve it in the Benko, tends to turn out well for him. If e5 and he takes it, I'll be loving my position after knight takes e5 because then I might even be able to put the knight on c6. So I think if I play e5, he's probably going to play knight d7. Maybe knight g4, but probably knight d7. And then I can either push e6, I could take on d6, or I could just play a move like bishop f4 and support that pawn. I'm going to play this because I feel like the way the position is played out, I'm already at liberty to execute this move. And we'll see what he does with the knight. Plays knight g4. Playing pretty quickly too. I think bishop f4 is a good move. That puts pressure on d6. I'm okay with a capture. I'm completely fine with a capture if he wants to do that. If bishop f4 and he plays queen b4, which would hit my bishop on that square and also the pawn on b2, I do have just queen d2 if necessary. That would cover both my b2 base and the loose bishop on f4. So yeah, let's just go here. I actually feel his knight is somewhat misplaced on a6. Usually the knight doesn't go there in the Benko. Usually it'll go to d7. So he'll have knights on d7 and f6. So that was another reason I went for e5, is because this knight wasn't directed against that e5 square. He's playing it a little unusually. So for him, a tough decision, whether to keep defending d6 or just give up any pretenses of holding that pawn and just taking on e5. So he plays rook f b8, counterattacking b2. So if I take, he takes, I take with the bishop, he takes on b2. That is getting messy and probably not in my favor. So I think it'd be fine just to play like queen d2 in this position. Rook e2 also. Well, rook e2, my rook is kind of double dipping. It might be defending e5 and defending b2, so I think I'd prefer queen d2, to be quite honest. Yeah, I think queen d2 is a good move. And then maybe I can even threaten to play h3, because with queen d2, I now have a queen-bishop battery against h6. So if I play h3, his knight would be running out of squares. He'd have to capture on e5, which is exactly what I want him to do. So look for that to be a theme soon. I somehow sense he's going to play rook b6 in order to support the d6 pawn and also maybe double up on the b file. But I do wonder about the role of that h3 move, should he do that, because let's say rook b6, h3, knight takes e5, let's say knight takes e5, f takes, d takes e5 rather, bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, rook takes e5. After all those exchanges, his pawn on e7 is weak at the end. He could play rook b8, but if I wanted to, I actually could take on e7 there. And if he takes on b2, his king is looking very weak. I know I'm kind of looking pretty far into the future in this line, but that's a forcing continuation that's possible after a pretty natural move for him, rook b6. So that just rubs me the wrong way for black. I think white's doing awesome in that line, so I'd be happy to explore that further should he play rook b6. What else can he do? Yeah, queen b4 is a move he just played. Against that, my default idea was just like rook b1, just defend. Again, there's this h3 move. I could do that if I wanted, but I think I want b2 secure in almost any position. So I'm kind of leaning towards just playing that. Yeah. My position is good, and I can afford the tempo to play this move. I still have the threat on d6. I still have the h3 move looming. No harm, no foul playing rook ab1. Investing a tempo to secure our position. This also gets my rook off of the diagonal, so it's no longer in the gaze of his dark square bishop. Which, granted, there's several things in the way between the dark square bishop and the rook, but there's going to be some action in the center. I think we can reasonably expect this pawn on e5 to not be there in another move or two at the most. It's either going to get exchanged or I'm going to be able to take on d6. Okay, so he is either ignoring my d6 attack or I don't know what. Going for some sort of counterattack of his own, like against c3? That's the only thing I can think of. So if I take on d6, is he going to take on c3 with his bishop? Is that his plan? So e takes d6, bishop takes c3. The point would be that if I take with the pawn, he does have queen takes b1. However, at that point, I might have just d takes c7. That looks pretty awesome, actually. D takes c7. I gotta figure that's good for me. At the very least, too, after e takes d6, bishop takes c3, I could play queen takes c3. But I see in that case he could swap queens and then maybe capture on d5, and I have an undefended bishop on f4. I'm just very skeptical of this entire concept here. Oh, maybe he's going to go e takes d6 and then e takes d6 and not play bishop takes c3 yet. That way, so if e takes d6, e takes d6, bishop takes d6, bishop takes c3, it's the same type of position. Yeah, b takes c3, queen takes b1. I could take on c7 even there. Rook takes a2. It's getting messy. I don't like that so much. Okay, now I'm thinking about just h3 again. I'm back to that h3 move. h3 compels him to take on e5, either with his knight or his pawn, probably with his knight. And yeah, I mean, it just wins me a pawn. Although he might have some rook takes a2 ideas towards the end of that line. This is proving to be a harder decision than I would have liked here. What else can I do? Are there any like other moves that I'm missing? What about just like pawn a3 to kick his queen off balance? Is that worthy of attention? It might be. h3 does solve my back rank issue, though. That's kind of a nice point about that move. Yeah, I'm starting to like it more and more. Also, if I move my bishop somewhere, I would be threatening maybe rook e4. Rook e4 is another move. Like rook e4, let's say I back the queen off to b6. My rook would be x-raying that undefended knight. I'm just not quite sure that's good. Seeing several lines here, but just not a clearly good one. Okay, I've thought for a while, so I'm gonna make the decision and go with h3. This is a critical position though, because he's playing very provocatively. It feels like I should be able to administer some punishment. I think h3 is a reasonable approach in this position. I hate to give him the option of taking on e5 or like forcing him to take e5, but I'm just really not sure about taking on d6. I think that gives him more activity than I would like here. Pretty much has to take on e5 some way. There's no other moves that are good. I would just take with the knight if I were him. He could take with a pawn, but taking with a pawn only gives me an extra option in like a move like bishop g3, let's say. So taking with the knight is probably what will be played. I think I'll just take with my knight after that. Okay, he actually does take with the pawn. That's interesting. I'm very tempted to just move my bishop now. Like bishop g3 and not take on e5. I wonder what the ramifications of that are. Because the reason why I'm tempted is that I think I might be able to get into like a... Yeah, you know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to see if I can... I think the risk to me is very minimal in playing this move. But I'm going to see if I can take with my knight on e5 and like threaten to come into e6. And maybe get him to part with that good dark square bishop. Actually, if he plays knight h6 and I take on e5, he can't even take with his bishop because I take with my bishop. And at that point, he'll have two loose knights. The knight on c7 will be undefended, and the knight on h6 will be undefended as well. So this is not good for him. Getting the knight to e5, especially when he wouldn't be able to take it, would be awesome because that c6 square is so juicy for me. If I get knight c6 in, supported by the pawn, at minimum, it'll be attacking two things, like hopefully the queen and rook, but probably the rook and the pawn on e7, because I think he would move his queen before I was able to like triple fork him. So the only other move he can make here is bishop h6, but bishop h6 I can just move away with my queen somewhere. Haven't even really thought about where, but like queen c2 looks fine, let's say. Yeah, I don't think d takes e5 was a good move order choice by him. Just knight takes e5 would have cut down on my options. Would have forced me to capture twice on e5. Now I'm making him stick around with this poor knight. Also nice to preserve this bishop on the diagonal. He's got a lot of stuff lined up there. His knight on c7 and his rook on b8. I think he will play knight f6. Wonder if he's thinking about something radical like e4. No, e4 is not a good move. Never mind. I was just thinking if e4, rook takes e4, he would have bishop takes c3 in that case. But on e4, I could even just play, let's say h takes g4, e takes f3, bishop takes c7. It just leaves another piece undefended for him. So he's not going to do that. Well, the time situation is equalized now, after I initially invested some time. Okay, he keeps playing moves I say he won't play. So he is opening his bishop with that move. That's the one redeeming feature of that. I wonder if I can actually just play knight takes e4 here and make sure he doesn't have that bishop takes c3 annoyance move. Isn't that fine? If I do that, he's got c7 and g4 hanging still. And I've neutralized his main idea. He can trade queens, but if he trades queens on d2, I'll probably just take with the e-knight. Yeah, and both his pieces will be hanging. Yeah, there's not much to this. Knight takes e4. If he goes knight e5, yeah, I can just take it. There's nothing. Okay, well, that's all the convincing I need. Let's just do it. Now I was looking at the h takes g4, e takes f3, bishop takes c7 continuation too, but I think it's unnecessary. Just eat a pawn, keep his pieces under attack still. I am letting him win the a2 or b2 pawns, or possibly even both, but he's going down a minor piece or two, so it's not relevant. Yeah, it's not much for him to do. I think it started going wrong for him when he played queen a5, to be honest. I think maybe he should have played knight d7 in this position so as to make me work harder to prepare e5. Because queen a5 just really invited the e5 advance. And he was never quite comfortable with the knight on g4. Especially when he passed up that opportunity to take with the knight on e5 a couple moves back on move 17. Yeah, now I want to take this way. Just so my rook is opened on e5 too, and so that he can't play knight e5 and block. So I'm ensuring that one knight will be undefended, even if he moves or defends one of them. Okay, rook b7. Yeah, I can just take on g4. I can take on c7 first. That's probably even more accurate. Make him take with his rook, then take there. Yeah, and then play something like knight c4, just so I don't lose my d5 pawn. If I had taken directly on g4, he could play knight takes d5. And he gets to keep another piece on the board, and he wins the d5 pawn. So this way I'm simplifying, and I'm keeping that d5 pawn, at least for now. And then just bag the material. He'll either take on a2 or go after the d pawn. And here I think I'll just play knight c4. Yeah, it was fine. Just defends b2. Also makes it easier to defend the d pawn if he goes and attacks it. Like say rook d7, I can play rook e d1 if I need to. So yeah, he's just down a full piece right now. No compensation. D6 was also probably a good move. And if he'd take, I could get to the back rank with check, but this is also way more than sufficient. And I still have D6 available if I want it. Yeah, I'm not expecting this game to last much longer. Well, I can play the D6 move as I was saying, or I could... there's a lot of things I can do. Knight E5 is a move. Knight FE5, let's say. Guess I don't have a clear preference about what I'd like to do here. Knight FE5 looks pretty good. I can try to get into C6. I can play B3 if I want. But he's not even really threatening to take the pawn because he's going to be mortally pinned on the file if he does take it. So it's kind of like, why even bother with that for me? Knight FE5, yeah, come to C6. He might go rook B4. But I can play B3 then. Yeah, let's do Knight FE5. Looks good. Keep his bishop out of the game. I'm just making my way to C6 where I can attack E7. That pawn is extremely vulnerable for him, so we'll just have our knight and rook attacking it both. So with that move, he's trying to control the movement of this knight. Because if I move that, he'd play rook takes C4. So I'll just play B3. And if he goes rook B4, I'll have knight C6. He can take on B3, but I win the E7 pawn. It's very good for me. Rook takes C4 doesn't work. I take, and my rook on E1 is defending the rook on B1. So that's nice. Small trap. If he takes on B3, I don't want to play knight takes E7 check first, because he would actually have rook takes E7 in reply. That would be highly unfortunate. And then no matter which rook I would capture, either rook takes B3 or rook takes E7, my other rook would be hanging. So kind of goes to show you, like, even in these simple positions, there's a tendency, there could be a tendency to make a mistake. Okay, here he's just letting me take his rook, so I'll just do that. Okay, and now I'm up a rook. Easiest way to win. What is the easiest way to win? Knight E5, maybe? Knight E5, protect the G4 pawn at the same time and make our way into C6. Looks pretty good. Many ways to get the job done. Oh, I'm also maybe playing around with the idea of knight D3. Attack his rook, attack the C pawn. This is a position where you could fast forward if you wanted to. There's really not much to be said. I'm up a rook, and there's no complications hardly at all. So, but if you want to stick around and listen to me as I try to find the most efficient way to win this position, you are more than welcome to do so. Always pays to be precise, right? Even in positions where you're totally winning, it just feels good to be able to play the position in the best possible way. Not saying I'm doing that right now, but that's my goal. Okay, so that move I'm just going to play knight c6, and attack his e7 pawn. If he plays rook takes d5, I take on e7. He has to take my knight, because I'm forking his king and rook. So, yep, he does that. We'll just grab the pawn. King f8 will be played, most likely. And I think I can just back my knight off to c6. This pawn is ready to run. I like having the knight here because it stops his rook from coming to d4. If he plays rook g5, I'll probably just play rook bd1. Get behind the pawn and start motoring with that d-pawn. My e-rook is cutting off his king, so his king can't assist in the defense. And he resigns. Okay. All right, so let's have a look. So another Benko Gambit. For some reason, I was just thinking it was going to be a Benko Gambit. But he could very easily play the Benoni, too, go e6. I haven't faced the Benoni on a standard video yet. But he plays b5. I went here. And I played this e3 variation, which I've had some success with recently. He took... I kind of think g6 is the more challenging move. Now that I've had some experience in this line, I think keeping the tension with g6 is a better idea. Now here the main line runs queen a5 check. And then knight c3, bishop b7, bishop d2, queen b6. And then I think a good line for white is knight f3 in this position. Knight takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, and now a4 to support the bishop. And this bishop will go to c3. White will castle, and usually they go knight d2 after that in order to prepare e4 or possibly the knight coming into c4. So, for instance, e6, bishop c3, bishop e7. Bishop takes g7 is not advised here because of rook g8 and the pawn on g2 is hanging. So let's say castle and castle, and now knight d2. This is a position I've referenced before in my videos, and I think it's better for white slightly. E4 is an option. And again, the knight can come here. Also, sometimes the queen pops out on g4 and threatens mate. Tries to cause some trouble. Black's a little bit behind in development, too. Hasn't got the knight out yet. So, that's one of the main lines. That's initiated with queen a5 check or bishop b7. That's another way to get into it. Bishop b7, knight c3, and now queen a5. So, after bishop takes b5, he played bishop a6. But, yeah, I felt this position was very easy to play for white. And even though in theory I'm like losing a tempo by having to play e3 and then e4, I've simplified the position without having to compromise my king, right? I didn't have to allow like bishop a6 takes f1, as sometimes happens in the Benko. Also, his knight is on a6, so it becomes less of a defender of the center. So I'm able to achieve e5 quicker. I didn't play e5 here because I was actually kind of worried about d takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes here with the discovered attack on this guy. I wasn't sure how that was going to play out. I see even here maybe there's a way I can keep some advantage. If knight c6, though, I think this move actually works for him. Otherwise, knight c6 would be a good move, but he can do that and counterattack my queen. So probably, like, if this happened, I could just take... He takes, I take, he takes here, and then I can win this pawn. With maybe some compensation for black after king g7. Position's pretty open. I do still have some problems with my queenside pawns. So that was possible, but I think rook e1 is good too. And here I speculated that maybe he should have played knight d7 to try to hold up the e5 pawn advance. Because queen a5 just invited me to play it. Let's see what the engine says. Engine says knight b4. That's another way to hold up the e5 pawn advance. Because if I go here now, he can take, and d5 is weak. Suddenly he has 3 attackers on that square, and I only have 2 defenders. Knight b4, it's interesting. The knight is kind of unstable here, though. So as soon as I play a3 and this rook is defended, the knight would have to move. So even here, it gives a nice big advantage to white. But queen a5, yeah, I went e5. He went here, bishop f4. Already white looking very healthy in the advantage department. Queen d2, okay. Says rook b1 might be a tad more accurate. I don't know. I don't know why that would be, but I liked queen d2 because it created this queen-bishop battery, as I was saying, and now h3 was an idea. Okay, so here, I had a little think, didn't I? Not too long. I guess I just played rook b1. Yeah, this move, maybe e takes d6 was more direct, but I really felt like I could play the position and defend b2 as well. So that's why I chose it. If e takes, yeah, take, rook b6. Gives some tricky stuff. a3. a3, queen takes b2, queen takes b2, rook takes b2, knight a4. Gives a big advantage to white. I don't know, this position looks very messy to me. I'm not disputing that white would have an advantage, but why would I want to go for this position? It just seems unnecessary. So, I think rook b1. I like the move I played. And he went here. And here's where I played h3. Yeah, I had a decent think on this move. What was that, like 3.5 minutes or so on this move? Deciding what to do. Because I was seeing some possible counterplay for him in the event of this line. And now bishop takes c3. With the main point being that if this, then queen takes b1 is possible. And if I take, he takes with the rook, and he's got 2 rooks for the queen plus activity. It's no good for me. So, yeah, I would have to play queen takes c3 here. But this line that the engine's giving, queen takes, b takes, rook takes b1, rook takes b1, and now I assume knight takes d5. I saw this in my head, and it seemed messier. White is still up a pawn, but this is loose and this is loose. So maybe there's a way I can keep the pawn, but yeah, I didn't want to have to figure it out. So eventually I decided on the h3 move. And yes, I do think he should play knight takes e5 in this position. I think this was maybe a poor move order. Yeah, the engine is starting to agree, maybe, about bishop g3. But if he took on e5, maybe he just really didn't like the look of the resulting position, like this. It is pretty nice for white. e6, and I was thinking about playing d6, trying to use my passed d-pawn. And white's up a pawn. Black's kingside is also looking very open. So I wonder if it'd be possible for me to like start swinging my pieces over there, create some mating attack. But at any rate, he played d takes e5, and I just dropped the bishop back. I'm surprised that the engine thinks knight f6 is actually reasonably playable for him. I wonder if that's because... okay. That must be because if I take here, he can actually take here. And I can't take with this knight because I lose my queen on d2. That's a tactic I did not see. For that matter, I probably would have played this move then. Just to attack his knight on c7. Gives queen b7, defending here and also putting more pressure there. Rook bd1, let's say. Yeah, still a big advantage to white. But maybe within manageable bounds for black. Plus 1.17 is not a game winner by any means. So I've lost way better positions than that. So interesting. But yeah, e4. Really, rook takes e4, huh? I didn't go for this because I thought he had bishop takes c3 stuff. But maybe not. Bishop takes c3. Do I take on b4? He takes d2. I take here. Okay, yeah. And just start winning a bunch of material with a gain of time. Then he has to move his rook, and I can take g4 or d2. Yeah, okay, so this is also winning. But I saw knight takes e4 was pretty smooth, too. Yeah, and he's not escaping without material loss here. Hanging pieces. Yep, and the rest is just clean up. Rook takes e7 was better, but you know this just wins a piece clear for me. This is another thing I mentioned before. like when you guys are going through your games and having them analyzed by the computer, like on chess.com or whatnot, don't sweat it too much. Like if you're in a winning position, let's say you're in like a +3 or 4 position, and all of a sudden you missed a chance to make it plus like 7, and the computer's like, oh, you blundered. You know, you had a chance to go to +7 from your +4. +4 is winning pretty easily most of the time, so don't worry about that. Unless it's like something you really should have seen, but if it's just like a convenience type of win you're going for, like for me, I was already, I don't want to say autopiloting, but I was making the easiest decisions I could that keep the game completely winning and reduce the amount that I have to calculate. And that's why I played bishop takes c7 and then took on g4, just bagged the material, and I'm +4. Like, yeah, I could play rook takes e7. I'm sure that's also a very good move. But, it involves a little more calculation. I have to keep his pieces around for another move or two. You know, increases the risk that something could go wrong. But I would not label rook takes e7 a mistake by any means over bishop takes c7 because, you know, we're basically splitting hairs here. It's like winning. You don't get extra points for a win of even more material, right? Like when you win a game, you get a full point in the cross table, and that's it. Doesn't matter how the win happened. So you got to choose the way that feels best to you. Yeah, nothing else really to discuss here. Oh, I wanted to show that trap at the end, just to show you that things can go wrong even when you're in a winning position. So like right here, was it? He moved his bishop to f6 to defend e7, but if he had played rook takes b3, it's very important that I take here first and then take on e7 if I'm going to eliminate that pawn. Because it'd be so easy for me just to go like, oh, rook takes b7, or knight takes e7, check. He's got to move his king, then I'll take this guy. But he has that, which is a nifty little response. And now whichever rook I take, he'll be able to take the other rook and reply. They're opposing each other down the files. So you can see that white's advantage would shrink to a very modest proportion at that point, like less than half a pawn from +7. That would be a actual blunder, a big blunder, a minus 7-point shift. So it's good to be aware of that. But yeah, if he had played rook takes b3, I would have chopped on b3 first and then taken on e7. Turned out to be a moot point because he played this and let me take on b4, and yeah, this is just cleanup time after this. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that Benko game against davalicc. And let's just do one more thing before we wrap up. I'm going to check what I'm at on the best list. So best 15. I was just kind of curious because I hadn't checked it for a day or two. Okay, so I'm number 4. And yeah, right up there with the top 15-minute players. Like to see that. All right, well, thank you for watching, guys. I'll be back tomorrow with another standard game. And please leave me any feedback in the comments. Talk to you guys later.